Hello everyone, and welcome to the Selfish Stream. Today it's Ladies' Night. We're doing a pair of human-female figures, which have, as I was looking at these a few moments ago, I noticed that they have this sort of like short rifle and what is clearly a pistol holster. So yeah, I'm not sure what that's all about. Their holster is clearly the wrong size for their gun. But sure, we'll run with that. It's fine. So for their uniforms, we're gonna do the usual class separation. I'm thinking, so you just looking at these in comparison to the males, I'm thinking these make probably one of these is going to make a better Marine than the male guy would, and then the other one. Inspector and engineer, and then we'll have the humans be a scientist and a pilot, or the male humans. So we're gonna go with yeah, we're gonna let one of them be in STEM, and one of them is gonna be the big heavy hitter. I think we're probably gonna want to keep their pants all the same for the purpose of uniformity. Not to sound overly stupid when I say that. We'll bring these guys a little forward. Yesterday, we're not going to be quite as ambitious as we were yesterday, since these are going to take a little bit longer on their base coats, and in fact we will probably go over since we started so late, but that is okay. So yeah, let's see, just looking at these, we've got the faces, forearms, and possibly like a little bit of the leg down here that seems not to be covered properly by the uniform. It's a little unclear. And that's all of the skin. They've got shoulder pads, the shirt, the pants, the holster, and its strap running around her leg there, a belt, and then just this gun in the middle here. So it's not too complicated, not too detailed. Oh yes, and then the hair needs its own color as well. Nothing too complex, but there are a few little bits that are probably going to take a little while to get just right, since the details are fairly flat against the surface of the piece. That is going to make it a little bit difficult to keep those lines clean, but that's alright. I'm thinking it makes most sense to paint the see, probably the belt, the strap, and the shoulder pads, and then also the tops of the boots and this thing around the knee, all the same color. Those are all going to be like that sort of like dark, like blackened leather. Can give probably. Well, we're probably going to do the boots the same color, actually, now that I'm looking at the concept art. They're all going to get the same color boots, belts, etc. I'm just going to look at the men for the sake of comparison. For some reason, they have way more detailed clothes. Not sure quite why that is. It's honestly a little bit jarring in comparison. Got more detailed arms, more detailed clothing. Got loads of little belt pouches. Why these guys are so much more detailed than the two women are? Very weird. Kind of stands out in comparison. Base on this one's a little bit lower as well. Wonder why. Anyway. Yeah, it does look like we'll be able to keep them pretty similar to each other. With their belts, the boots. He doesn't have a holster, but he does have a handgun that would probably fit in her holster. Well, no, he does have a holster over here. It's just got a flap on it. Sorry, can't see that at all. I just looked up and noticed. Yeah, so he's got his holster over here on the left. He's got boots with the same kind of trim along the top. No knee pads. He does have shoulder pads, though. Those are going to be probably the same color on them as well. We're going to use the shirts as the primary means of distinguishing these guys. Looks like the men's shirts go down to at least the elbow, and then they've got some kind of equipment around the right wrist, and then the left wrist it comes down all the way. So that's not so bad. Not so bad at all. Should be pretty easy to keep them consistent. Before we even get there, I'm 100% sure that I'm going to paint one of these male figures like Buck Rogers. So I was thinking about it, that's actually a pretty good comparison for Battlestations. It's second edition is trying to be Firefly, but first edition was so far in the Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century territory that we're never getting away from it. All right, so we need gunmetal for the equipment. We'll need charred brown for one of the hair, and for most of the leather equipment. We'll have dark flesh tone for one of them. We're gonna try and make sure that there's some racial diversity here. Since this is proper space age egalitarian society. One of them is gonna be Caucasian. I'm not sure if I should do one of the men Caucasian and one of the women Caucasian, if I should do both. No, you know what? One of the women... I think one of the women, like Native American looking, if we can. Might be hard to get the skin tone right, since these paints aren't really made for that. Let's see, we should be able to get that with the... like the dark flesh tone and the flesh wash should get us pretty close to that. Actually. So we're going to start them both with the dark flesh tone, and then we're going to use different washes to and different dry brushing to distinguish their skin tones a little bit better. Let's see. So we'll start with the dark flesh tone for both of them, since that's probably going to be one of the harder colors to keep clean. So yeah, we're going to have one of African descent, one of American descent. We can do one Caucasian male and one... I'm thinking like Asian, maybe? Asian-ish looking. Try and get some kind of variety, right? This dark flesh tone paint is actually very light. I wasn't expecting that. All right. Now, one of these pieces does have a little bit of a problem with her left elbow, since it actually arrived in my possession with the left elbow completely detached from the rest of her body. So she does have a bit of super glue on that joint, which I discovered after she was primed. So we might have some issues with that. I hope not, though. These two are probably going to have pretty similar hair colors as well, actually. Try and keep them from being too samey, I guess. From the way that the sculpt looks and from the art, it looks like her uniform kind of goes right up to her, right up to the top of her neck. We'll try and reflect that in the paint job if we can. Okay, that's one head and arms done. Nothing too complicated there. Just double check the spot with the glue. Finish on that's going to be slightly different because of the differing compound surface quality, but hopefully at the very least it won't be too noticeable. I'm mostly worried that it might make them prone to chipping on that spot, which would really not be great. No, I've had enough blue-skinned humans for the last little while. We're done with that. You want me to paint a Celt? I will absolutely paint him blue. Woad Raiders are scary, man. And you've got this big Celtic dude, super burly, stark naked, covered in blue paint, screaming at you from across a snowy field. I mean, that's got a pretty good chance of demoralizing your army. They're not stupid enough to fight the guy that does that. At least that was the historical basis. You know what's funny is this is actually one of the first human figures that I've actually painted, period. Done all these weird aliens and spaceships. No humans, though. I literally don't think I've painted a single human until now. Well, no, that's not true. I did the scoundrel in Gloomhaven. That was the first human. Okay, that's the skin tone done. The base coat for the skin tone, I should say. One of them gets to be a little bit less tan, because they are very brown right now. And the other one is going to be a little bit more. A little bit more melanin. Let's see. Let's give one of them the nice bright red shirt. And the other one gets blue. We'll do them one at a time. It's going to be hard to get in there between the arms and the body, but I'll see what I can do. We're going to need to put down 2 coats because this stuff's not hiding very well over the gray or the primer. Not sure if I want them all to have the same pants. I feel like I should. I'll have to clean her face off in a minute. It's a bit gross and red now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is definitely going to pose some challenges. Not that it isn't already. I suppose what I mean by that is that I will almost certainly have to redo most of the skin areas. Or at least touch up most of the skin areas. Right. Well, she's getting redder as we go. Alright, hopefully that paint is on thoroughly enough that it's not going to look terrible. It kind of looks terrible. Should have pre-coated white. Well, whilst she is drying, go ahead and clean our brush out a little bit. And then we will touch up her skin where the red got. There's a few spots. Come to think of it, this marine is actually going to probably end up looking like a really angry Uhura from Star Trek, the original series. I kind of dig that idea. Okay. Look, that's about as red as she's going to get. Move on to our engineer. Get her shirt put on. Use magic blue for that, nice and bright. get this this blue all over her, as requested. Fortunately, this color hides real well, so we should only need one coat. Under the top, front, and the sleeves last. Get the back and flanks first. Just because that's going to be easier to get right the first try. Hey? First trim, if you prefer. One advantage of the model having all of these little crevices that are hard to get the paintbrush into is that sometimes those crevices are also hard to see. And therefore it's not a big deal whether they get painted properly or not. The players are never going to see it on the board. Not because they won't be looking, but because it's literally invisible. I'm going to paint over these shoulder pads entirely just to make sure that I get all of this area properly. Even though that's not the color they're going to end up at the end. Oh, and there's the blue face paint. Had to come eventually. This autofocus is just the worst. One second and I'll show off my mistake. Nice, like, scar across her face. And now it's brown again. Okay. All right. Well, that's a pair of fancy shirts. That'll show off their progress a little better, I think. Alright, now we need to figure out their pants. I'm not sure how I want their pants to look. Do we want to just go with khaki? Feels a little lame. But it's also distinctly in line with the concept art. Well, let's go with khaki. It'll make it easier for the other details to stand out as well. Make everything show up nice. And we'll keep the khaki out for tomorrow when we do the human males. Same deal with the charred brown, since that's what their detailing is going to be. All their belts and pads and whatever. So we'll just go with our generic, boring khaki. Then maybe to give it just a little bit of color, we'll use like a leather brown or something to dry brush over that and the belts and so forth. Since I think that'll help them just look a little bit more realistic and sort of tie it together a little bit more. Whole color scheme. I mean, at the risk of making the engineer look like a Best Buy employee. I suppose it would have been worse if it was with the male, though. Make sure their waistline is painted up properly and that the belt is still clearly visible by the end of it. Basically, the goal here is just to slightly overlap the belt. And then we'll bring this down to just below the knees where the boots begin. I'll lay this paint on fairly thick because it doesn't hide very well and there's not really any detail to obscure, so might just as well. It's a lazy approach for sure, but there's not anything that's going to really hurt. Getting there. honest question, if anybody in my generation out there has seen Buck Rogers in the 25th century, aside from me, what do you suppose they were thinking naming the robot Tweaky and giving him Mel Blanc as a voice? Like, I can't deny that it worked, but it's darn weird. Alright, getting there on the pants. Sorry, my commentary right now is probably not great. Pretty out of it today, so I'm kind of having trouble focusing on two things at once. I can either talk or paint. I'm having trouble doing both. In the meantime, who else out there likes Toe Jam and Earl? Roguelike, before that was a thing. Rogue had been around for ages, but nobody really did roguelikes, except maybe NetHack. I'm sure that's not true. I'll bet Angband was in full swing long before that. But the fact is, they put out a cartoon roguelike with Genesis. And it was released to widespread... Huh? This is a freaking weird game. With weird characters and amazing funk music. Yeah, exactly, yeah. It's like, as far as I know, it's one of the first, like, fully graphical, you know, non-grid type roguelikes. So, you know, certainly the first, one of the first roguelikes that doesn't look like a roguelike at first glance. Let's not have a bubble in the paint, shall we? Yeah, Toe Jam and Earl is really cool. I actually have Panic on Funkatron, and it is an utterly unrelated game from a gameplay perspective, but it's also pretty good. It's totally different in every way, but I like it. It's fun. It's a much more traditional like platformer type game, but it has some interesting mechanics and an equally awesome soundtrack, which I can live with it. I want to get a hold of the original though at some point. All right, so we need to do some of those other details, such as the hair, the boots, the belt, all the stuff that gets the charred brown, basically. And now our paints, as always, with the 2-to-1 mixture. So we are being kind of ambitious. We're completely start finishing 2 minis tonight, which we've only successfully done once before. Last night we did 4 minis, but they were not start to finish. They had all been partially worked on before at some point. So they were in various states of completion when we started. And this time we're going all the way from point A to point B. I think we're probably going to use the sepia shade for most of their bodies. Both of them. Well, all 4, I guess. And then once we have that down, we will also use an umber wash for one of their faces and a flesh wash for the other. Or not faces, but skin tones. Not just faces. Faces, I should say. Really driving the struggle bus today. At least the paint job's coming out alright. Suppose if I have to pick between sacrificing the commentary or the paint, I'll pick the commentary. That will protect the outcome. Jam and Earl is so much a product of its time. Like it's really interesting to look at it now, because there's Toe Jam and Earl Back in the Groove, which is a remastered, new graphics, new sound remake of the original, and it is so culturally irrelevant that it's genuinely hard to see from that why it was originally successful. Like even knowing why it was originally successful, the original game looks fine because it feels like it belongs in the era it came from. The new game doesn't. It feels like it belongs nowhere really. Like the game graphically feels modern. The sound is put together really well, of course, but it just like it just doesn't feel like a modern game because it's not a modern game. It feels like this goofy artifact of 90s culture that just sort of somehow leaked into the present. It's very weird. And pardon the pause here. I'm just queuing up some more music. I mean, like, just as an example, one of the tracks is titled Rap Master Rocket Rap, which worked brilliantly in the context of 90s culture. Like, that was a thing, you know? That was the way people talked in some culture, in some, like, subcultures, of course. Not everyone. But then it stopped being like that, and trying to bring something like that into the modern age, into a post 90s and post 2000s world, it leaves it in a very awkward place of just kind of not, like, it feels really aggressively irrelevant. And that's not something that I want to say about a game that was so historically cool and influential to its genre. I need a detail brush for some of this. Oh no, and I've found an entire section where there's no red and no brown. Ah, let's fix that before I forget. Okay, and we'll fix the red. Hmm. I missed that before. It's really visible. This hair painted up. Almost got the hair done here. Probably going to want to use a detail brush for the shoulder pads, the belt, and the strapping. And the red definitely needs to touch up. Or not even a touch up, we just need to get some of this brown off of it. Alright. clean up those edges in a minute with the detail brush. A little rough right now, but that's okay. It's this shoulder pad that's gone a little bit awry. Where is my 10-0? Sending everything else. There you are. That wasn't even... What the heck? Just put on completely the wrong color when I was trying to touch up where that color had gone. Just fix that and pretend it never happened, hey? Yeah, that's better. Let's grab the correct color this time, shall we? Okay, that's better. Let's strap around her leg. Hold this misshapen holster in place. And we're going to need to go over the edges of that with the khaki again as well. We'll do the same thing around knee pads, whatever these things are. My hand's gone a bit shaky. It's frustrating. Lines are still coming out alright though. As well as it could be expected at least. Not perfect, but when are they ever? Around the edges of this knee pad thing. I admit it, I'm not excited to do this twice. But I am pretty excited to be done, because there's literally just 2 figures left after today. Okay. Let's see, shoulder pads and belt. Still to go. Touch these shoulder pads up first. That looks alright. Doing this with shaky hands is not the greatest experience. I don't mind telling you. So what I think I'll do is try and get the top edge all smoothed out. Vehicles and the aliens that didn't get a mini the first time. There's more? Kidding me? I mean, like, vehicles in the spaceship pack, sure, but I really thought that they'd got all the critters the first go around. Other than the Whaloid, what's left? Have they announced what the other critters are? It's like they've already got minis for every critter type I was aware of. Hmm. Guess send that over because I'm kind of curious. Yeah, the areas around these holsters on both of them need some help. Just need a little bit of touch up. Their paint kind of goes everywhere. I mean, I guess if they gave you a list, I'd like to know what's on it. Partially so I can brace myself, but mostly because I actually don't know what else there is in Battlestations, because I think I genuinely thought this was everything. A few humans, a rhino, a turtle, a giant slug, a rabbit, a bear, maybe a bot, and some bubbles. Oh my gosh, really? More critters? I guess I shouldn't be so surprised. Planet of Dr. Moreau is just like literally all the animals. Fortified vehicles. Yeah, like I'm fine to do vehicles like that. That I'm actually kind of excited for because I like doing vehicle paint. It's just a very different thing from regular minis. And it's something that I don't get to do very much because I don't really have any myself. I'm actually kind of excited to take a crack at that. Also, they have that like spaceship pack that's one ship in each of the main races configuration. I might be fine to go over those as well. Alright, I apologize again for the bad commentary today, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do this if I don't keep my focus. Alright, let's see this. Oh, so like planet side stuff. There's like a car. Oh, so this isn't. Huh. Okay, yeah. Oh, I see what you're talking about. This is actually a standalone. This isn't. This isn't Battlestations. This is its own game. Huh. Sort of like a companion type game rather than its own thing. Yeah, there's definitely a bot in there. Some sort of like tank. We're right about the slug. And whatever that is behind the bear is like dancing. Huh, yeah, alright. That will be interesting. Alright. Well, back to work. Now that I've had my 1 minute break. Time we got 9:13. Okay. Given how late we started, I don't think I'm doing too badly on this, but at the same time, it's not going as quickly as I hoped. Fully cooperative and solo campaigns. Yeah, yeah. Sounds right up your alley. I know you appreciate a good solo. There's apparently a new game by Soaring Rhino on Kickstarter right now. It's called Mammoth or something like that. I don't remember if it's actually called Mammoth, but it's got mammoths in. I haven't really looked at the Kickstarter campaign yet. It's apparently co-op or competitive. And I want to support it, even though I don't really know anything about the game because it's by Craig Van Ness. mean, of course, I'm gonna like actually take a close look at the game before I buy it, but I think I've made clear in the past exactly how much I want to support Craig Van Ness's design career. Like, guy made Heroescape, Hasbro shafted his project, and kind of shafted him a little bit as well by torpedoing his next project, causing it to fail. And he's doing his own thing, and he's super cool about it. So I'm all about that. Alright, got the knee pads, now we're doing the belt. Once the belt is done, I think we're going to switch back to the 3.0 brush. Okay. Alright, so that's looking good. Before I switch over, actually, I'm going to use the khaki to touch up some of my mistakes here. In the pants area. And specifically, around this holster. Well, let me rephrase that. I'm going to mix some more khaki because it dried out like really, really fast. Okay. I don't know if I've ever had paint dry out that quickly after being thinned. Very weird. Just clean out this paint pod here. Make sure that it's not going to get any of the little crumbly dried bits into it. Just mix the one drop this time. Well, 1.5 because it decided to be a little blob. Okay, that's better. There's actually paint on the brush now. Let's also just clean up this line up here while we're at it. All right, and we'll do the same for marine. With, again, the wrong color of paint. Good grief. Not sure I'm awake enough to be doing this today. All right, that's looking good. All right. Same business with these legs as before. I wonder which one of these figures in the entire collection I ended up using the most distinct paint colors on. I doubt if I'll correctly even remember which ones had more colors than the others. That's one boot done. That's a massive smear of paint in the wrong place, so let's fix that. All right, fix that mistake. Let's go back to it. quickly make sure we got the bottom done. All right, and then we'll move on to the actual boot. Okay, now we'll do the edge, just this top little bit. Make sure that's all nice and smooth. At least as smooth as I can get it, eh? All right, and then lastly, we'll just clean up the hair a little bit. And that will just about make them both ready for the wash. Or washes, I suppose. I'll probably need to use the 10-0 brush for this top bit. Around the edges of this, just because it isn't very precise. I got lucky on the other one and only needed to touch up 1 point. Okay. Alright, let's get this edge all nice and clean. And as usual, we're going to leave the guns for just about the last. All right. All right. 2 base coats down and done. Now we need the sepia shade. That's going to go over their entire bodies. except for the faces and arms. Yeah, it's looking good so far. Nice and subtle-ish. Okay. A little bit more to make sure that this is all nice and even. All right, good. Once that dries, we'll show that off. And then we'll do the same to the blue one over here. Not sure if I like how that combines with the blue, but I think it'll be all right. Alright, and that's two. Get this brush cleaned out properly. Make sure it doesn't get all stiff. And we're going to use the 3-0. Give one of them an umber wash and the other one a flesh wash. On the face and arms. Okay. So there's our umber wash down. And here we've got the other one, the flesh wash, which is a lot redder than you would expect from the name. Right, and then lastly, her hair just gets a tiny bit of black wash on it. Don't need much of that at all. Oh dear. That's just mixed with the other wash because I wasn't paying attention. Crap. Okay. Well, we can fix that easily enough. All right. So here we have our African Marine. Post wash, pre dry brush. And the wash isn't quite dry yet, but here we have our Native American engineer. Again, post-wash, pre-dry brush. As you can see, her head's still very reflective because I've got a black wash up there that has yet to dry. While those dry, I'm gonna briefly clean off part of my palette here because it's getting a little full. Specifically the bits where I put the washes. Because if those stay there, they get a little bit sticky. That does not help with cleanup afterwards. So hopefully we've dodged that bullet a little bit. Alright, now let's mix up the colors that we need for the dry brush coats. So we're going to need, let's see, what colors are we going to need? We're going to need a little bit of gory red. We're going to mix that into our dark flesh tone, assuming that it's still wet, which is not. Crap. Okay. So I'll just have to mix a little bit more of that. Do 1 drop of that and 2 drops of the dark flesh tone. That should give us what I really hope is a respectful reflection of Native American skin tones. Because I am trying to improve representation here, not caricaturize it. And of course this is just the dry brush, so it shouldn't be too massive of a change. And we'll be doing something similar with the darker charred brown that we've already got. Mix some of that with the dark flesh tone. About 2 drops. Just the same ratio. And we're going to use that to darken the freaking sanded skin. Again, hopefully in a way that is as respectful as I am capable of getting it. Because making caricatures is not the goal here. Right, okay, that may not have been wet enough still. Just gonna add a tiny bit more in there. We're just gonna use this for the highlights. And only in dry brush, so it's gonna stay fairly close to the skin tones they have now. We may actually want to commit a cardinal sin here and dry brush with a pointed brush. On account of we need to do this in a very, very small space. Alright, subtle, but it'll do. Clean that off the brush the rest of the way. And then we'll do the same thing with the redder brown. And hopefully that leaves them sufficiently distinct from each other. Not sure if that's true, but hopefully. They've got a difference in skin tone. It's noticeable. I think it's good. Let's show that off closer to the camera. Oh, geez, I left it unfocused again. Sorry about that, guys. Get them both in frame there at the same time. Kind of see. Yeah, it's reasonably visible, I'd say. I do apologize for that. That was my bad. So we're going to give a dry brushing of black to the Marine's hair and a dry brushing of the Marine's skin tone to Scientist's hair. We're doing this a little weird. We'll need our small dry brush for this, of course. And then we'll use that for the rest of it as well. So we'll thin our black paint real quick. As much of that as possible because it's going to be pretty intense. Do not want to overdo this. Another one of those elements that I actively want to avoid caricaturing. I just want it to be a little bit more defined. I think we've got that. And albeit with a different color, we're going to do the same thing over here. Yeah, nice. So once we've done the dry brushes on both of those, I'll go over this in a little bit more detail so you guys can actually see what I'm talking about here. At the moment, it's going to be quite a bit of effort to constantly refocus the camera that could be used to give them a better color scheme a little bit faster. Alright, so let's get some leather brown out. And this is going to go over their belts, pants, and boots, as well as the shoulder pads. Alright. Going pretty well, actually. I'm liking it. Fortunately, since we're doing some of this over a really dark color, a little bit goes a long way. It's lightening the wash and darkening the khaki. So we're getting a little of both of those effects. Looking nice. Alright, that's looking good. Some of it's a little bit much, but that's alright. Yeah, and there on these. It's hard not to overdo it with this this particular combination of colors. The darker brown is really sensitive to this this leather brown, because a very little amount is required to really change it quite a bit. I'm kind of just trying to be cautious about that. paint elsewhere first. Alright, good shoulder pads. One of our legs looks a little bit more yellow than I would have liked, but that's okay. It's close. And then on both of their shirts, we're just going to use the original colors that we started with. So we're going to use that same blue and the same red, which have both dried up. Okay. Shouldn't be surprised, but here I am nonetheless. Only need a tiny bit though, so that's fine. Alright. A little bit of red for the Marine. Shine that shirt up a little bit. Just give her a little bit more red for her red. A little bit more blue for the blue. Basically, we're just going to exaggerate what's already there a little bit. Bring it back out. Since the wash sort of hid some of that. Alright, rinse and repeat. Quite literally. Oh dear. Now her arm is a bit blue. Let's fix that. Geez, if I can. Come on now. Oh no. Yeah, gonna have to fix that. Oh boy. I was worried about that. Some of the paint didn't stick. Hmm. So that arm's going to look a little bit weird. Nothing to do about it. Alright, let's try that again. Why the heck am I having so much trouble with this right now? See if I can correct this without completely ruining it. Ah. Yeah, I don't think I can do that without tearing the paint straight off of the surface. Jeez. Brutal. Just gonna have to be more careful now. Try the brush a little more thoroughly as well. So, you remember earlier how I was saying how useful it is that this blue hides really well? It's actually a huge problem when you're dry brushing. Probably should have thinned it further. Might have given me better results. Now we know. Don't know if I've used this for dry brushing before. So in my defense, this is kind of a new thing. Okay, that'll do. Not perfect. Not my best work. On account of the blue streaking all over the place. Well, you missed me screwing up the blue over and over. So that's neat. Observe. So she's in okay shape. Then we got our marine. All right, so that's where they're at right now. Need to do their eyes and their weaponry, and I think that's it. That is just about all I need at this point. So what we're gonna do is take it kind of easy on the eyes. Be a little cautious about that. Use a little bit of a white primer. And we're actually going to mix that with a little bit of skin tones. that should ease things off a little bit, make it so that it's a little bit more resistant to looking completely insane. We are going to have to go over this with the skin tone as well, just to clean it up after we're done. It's going to start extremely excessive, and we're going to tone it down afterwards. Okay, so right now they look both ridiculous and terrifying. So we're gonna fix that real quick. Just as a brief reminder, eyes are hard. I'm using a technique that I learned from Terry Latorco, who is a pro painter. And it is making things a little easier, but not much. So this is just not easy to do at this scale. Okay. Now it's time for the gunmetal for the guns. And we'll put a little bit of our scarlet red on those as well, just to indicate them as marine equipment. All right. And this is going to be a little bit tricky because this is one of the parts of the piece that's really not accessible. Gun is both really close to her head, which makes it hard not to mess up the face, and also really close to her body, which makes it really hard to get at the back. Okay, I think everything visible is painted properly. So switch over to the other one. I'm not going to go over time by too much for once. A nice change. Somehow I have not ruined their shirts. I'm actually kind of impressed with myself for that. It's like a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of her face that got a little bit of the paint stuck to it, but that's because it's so close to the gun that the actual paint, like there's a little bridge between the two. It's a little bit noticeable, but there's nothing I can do about it because it's physically too close to fit the brush between. We'll finish this out with the detail brush and our scarlet red on both the guns. Okay, so we're gonna do little greeble on the bottom here. And then we're going to do the bit along here. Guess I can actually reach that part. And then as usual, we'll repeat the process for our second buddy over here. As yet unnamed. Alrighty. I think we're just about done. So I'm leaving some of my paints out tonight. Obviously not the ones on the actual palette. But we're going to leave some of the paint bottles out so that I can remember exactly which colors we need. Just to repeat, in my defense, eyes are really hard. At least, like, human-looking eyes. Alien eyes are easy and fun. Fantasy eyes are easy and fun, but human eyes, very difficult to get right. These guys look a little bit mutated. But I do like the way their guns came out. I think that looks really nice. And here's the other. Okay. And that is our human marine and our human scientist. And the end of our stream for the night. So, we'll be back tomorrow to do the two human males. These guys. One of them is going to be Asian, the other one is going to be Buck Rogers, which is probably going to be pretty weird, but that's okay. But in the meantime, yeah, we're just about done at the moment, and we have just 2 figures left to go before the entire Battlestations collection is done. After that, before the end of the week, oh, that's quite all right. Before the end of the week, I would like to take a crack at the dragon from Shifting Realms. That mini requires a little bit of prep on my end, so I'll take care of that in the next day or two. And then we will paint it up and make it all fancy. So in the meantime, have a great evening, everybody, and we'll be back tomorrow.